start at the beginning of this again. Anyway, let me just tell you what these are before I start the play on them. These are just images. They're from your textbook, but I think they're pretty interesting in terms of just looking at, and they tell you what it is, and the pictures I don't really have to tell you, but there's just sort of, these are just illustrations of showing you the sorts of things that we can look at in anatomy and how beautiful anatomy is. The brain. And these are sections, so this is the reason why it's important to understand sections of the body. All these different types of scans, a sonogram of a fetus. Scan of normal heart. So these are just types of ways that we image the body. And so, I guess that's the little slide here. Do you want to see it again? No. Anyway, I'll show you some other cool images. I have a lot of nice, cool images. I'm really into cool images. So we'll look at some more. So this is just kind of a summary of what we've just looked at in terms of introduction to anatomy. And it is considered a mature science. And it is a mature science. However, I think because we have such great imaging techniques today, we're actually seeing more things than we've ever seen before. And when you go back to the history and you realize that Galen's idea of anatomy persisted for 1,500 years, and when Vesalius came along and decided that, you know, anatomy needed to change, the study of anatomy, and he, of course, really reintroduced the idea of dissection, a lot of people were really upset. And you can find quotes where people have said, I would rather die with Galen than accept Vesalius's ideas. And when you look, and I have some few little history things when we get, especially in the organs, and I'll read to you little stories about some of these early anatomists. I mean, it was quite a colorful history. One of the scientists anatomists who discovered one of the structures from the pancreas to the small intestine lost his life. I mean, he was assassinated by a jealous colleague. So, you know, this subject matter brought up a lot of emotion, and I think it is pretty emotional because we're studying about ourselves. Okay, so this is kind of the end of the introduction to anatomy. Anyone have anything else? Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, oh, here we have a few more things. Wait a minute. And I have an assignment to do with this, and then we're going to start talking about histology today. So this is, planes of section. What plane is this? Sagittal. And the MRI of the knee is a sagittal plane through the knee. Now, if you cut the knee directly in half, what plane of the body is that? Not of the knee, but of the whole body. Like, say I had a whole person here, but I made a section through the whole body. Parasagittal. Very good. Okay, you guys, keep that in your mind. Don't let yourself forget something small like that. If I had a knee and I'm just looking at the knee, yes, that would be a sagittal section through the knee. But if I'm looking at the body, remember that. Okay. Okay, so this is a PT scan of the entire body and a CT scan of the kidney. Name the plane of reference. So what is this reference in the PET scan of the entire body? What is it? Coronal. Coronal or frontal. You could say either one, coronal or frontal. What is it dividing the body into what? Anterior and posterior. That's correct. Okay, now of the kidneys, what is that? Sagittal. Okay. Or not sagittal, transverse. Excuse me. Transverse. Okay. All right. So here is your first assignment. And this is just a little assignment for the lecture. It's just, and I'm going to want you to hand it in next week. I have just a few of these through the semester, and I think you'll enjoy this assignment. I'm going to give you an example of how I interpreted it. So what I want you to do is I want you to take an apple at home, and I want you to cut it. And I want you to cut it in 3 different pieces. And then I want you to describe to me how you cut it. So you would be saying like, you know, I began in the superior sagittal plane and sliced, however you're going to slice it. Oblique, you can talk about that, you can transverse, you could do, I want you to make 3 cuts, at least, a minimum, but if you do too much, you'll have too much writing. It's really just, I want a little tiny description. I just want you to think about it. How would you describe how you did that surgery, or on the apple? I'm thinking of, in our lab, we have a description that I discovered this morning. It was in a drawer. There's all kinds of weird things in the lab that are fun to discover because the lab's been here for so long. And it was a description that a surgeon gave as he was repairing an aneurysm in the brain. But the way that he had to describe every cut that he made, every, you know, where he began his cut, where he ended it, everything he did. I mean, this is what you would have to do. You have to be able to describe this, and this is what this language is all for. So I want you to describe how you cut the apple. It's going to involve sections, planes of sections. And then, the fun one, I want you to create a word using anatomical terms that would describe your shoes, or a pair of shoes. It doesn't even have to be your shoes. It can be a wild pair of shoes, or any pair of shoes. Like, maybe, and these terms, let me back up for a second, you can find these terms in your textbook it's on the front and back covers of the book. You can find some of these words in the lab manual. And I know some of you have the 11th edition, I think they're also in there. And we don't have the lecture manual, so but those words are there. And let me show you. So here would be an apple, slices. You know, you could cut, let's just talk about these for a second. So this type of slice could be a sagittal slice, and this one would be a transverse slice. Okay, and then we have a couple of other terms, and we have ipsilateral, contralateral, things like that. And here's some shoes. I think these are the fun. So here, this is just a couple of shoes I found online. And here's this high heel, and I called it a retro-exo epispike heel. And what this means is behind on the outside. Retro-exo, behind on the outside. Epi, near the spike heel. It's a spike heel. So this is retro-exo, epi, spike heel. It's kind of a play on words because it's a spike heel and the heel has spikes. And then this one is an endo speaker with sub-disc speaker. So it's got I don't think this is real, but this is a little CD that slides into the bottom of the shoe with speakers. And here's a big speaker, and I don't know what these are, subwoofers, I don't know. But anyway, so I want you to just kind of have fun with this. Just, there's no right or wrong answer. But I do want you to use some of these anatomical terms. And this is, you can also find a description of this on iLearn. So, and does anyone have any questions?
So we don't have to turn it in online, or we want to?
I'd rather you bring it in to me. Yeah, don't turn it in online, because then it's just too hard to keep track of this many people. And you know, it doesn't have to be fancy. And it'll be I have a couple of these assignments, and I think online it says something like, I don't know, the way they describe the grade is kind of funny. It's kind of a participation. This is more of a participation points and grades.
Back to what you were saying about the lab manual. Under the textbook, there's a lecture manual.
There is a lecture manual, and you know, Dr. Williams doesn't even use it anymore. You can buy it if you want. Some people say that it's a good study tool. We don't follow it anymore. It's really old. But the bookstore, did they have copies of it? Yeah. Do they don't say it's required?
Yeah.
Well, it actually is a really good study tool. It's just that the lecture is like on way off of that that's like years, that's like pre-computer, you know. That was like before people had laptops and all that, so it's really old. I didn't know I didn't write it down as required. Oh well, I put the text for Torrid 12th edition in the lab manual.
I bought it because I said it was required. I bought it.
Oh, how many people bought the lecture manual? Oh my God. Well, you know, it's not returnable, but yeah.
Well, I've seen this happen before, and if they go through you, like with this many people buying the lab manual, and I know they say it's not returnable, but if they go through you, like you guys made a mistake saying it was required, then they can send it in.
Yeah, okay, I'll go over there and tell them it wasn't required, and we'll see. If not, don't anyone buy any more lecture manuals. You don't have to buy it. I mean, even though it says it's required, I mean, you know, you don't have to buy it. So anyone else, do not buy the lecture manual, but hopefully we'll have enough. You can have one per study group, and you might find it useful. It is a good study tool. It's just that it'll frustrate you if you're trying to use it to take notes. But it is a very good study tool. And written by Dr. Williams, it's very good. It's a good supplement. So anyway, I think you'll have fun with this. Okay. I think what my problem is I put some of these on Keynote, and I realized that Keynote is not really very compatible with it's not very compatible with the system that they have here. I think that's why it messes up, for some reason. Okay, so we're gonna start talking about histology and cells. Now, I'm not gonna go into a lot of cellular anatomy. I'm not gonna talk about organelles or any of that. You should have had that in Bio 101 or 230. If you have not, if you feel like you need help with just understanding cellular structure in and of itself, the chapter on cells is assigned reading, but we're not going to talk about it or test on it or anything like that. I just have it as assigned reading as for just review for people, because depending upon when you took 101, could have been a couple of years ago, or 230. But we do kind of need to understand where the cells, you know, we need to understand a few things about cellular anatomy. But we're just going to talk right now generally about different types of cells. And so these are all different types of shapes of cells. Our whole body is made of cells, and the cells do some amazing work. They do all the work in our body. And so when we showed this, we looked at this last week or Tuesday, but again to review. So the cellular level, tissue level becomes the organ, and then that can become the system, and then those multitude of systems then can become the organism. Okay, so we have this classification of these types of tissues that you would find in an organ. And we talk about them by their embryonic origin a lot of times. We talk about them being intracellular or extracellular, their materials. What does that mean? Intracellular means what? Inside the cell, and extracellular is outside the cell. And then there are these types, and then we have these types of tissue. These are four very important, these tissues make up organs. Connective tissue, muscle tissue, nervous tissue, epithelial tissue. These four tissues you will find in every organ. But just the shape, the configuration, how they're working together is going to be different. So what you're seeing here is just the three different types of muscle tissue. We have in terms of types of tissue. So we have skeletal muscles. This is what we normally see as skeletal muscles. We sometimes call it striated. And then we have cardiac, or smooth muscle rather, excuse me, cardiac tender. Smooth muscle has these kind of spindle-shaped cells. Muscle tissue, we'll talk more about muscle tissue when we get into muscles, because it has a lot of specific sorts of features and that's processes and organization. And then we have cardiac muscle, which is again striated muscle, but it is sort of this basket weave sort of a pattern to when you look at cardiac muscle when it's piece apart. Okay, so it takes these 4 basic types of tissue. Here we have a piece of intestine, small intestine at the top here. And so we're going to look for these 4 different types of tissues. We're going to have epithelium here. This would be a microvilli. Now again, the issue here is not small intestine, it's types of tissue. So we have epithelial tissue. We have a nervous tissue coming along here. We have muscle, smooth muscle tissue here. And let me see the other 4. Anyway, so So the one I want to talk about first is epithelial tissue. There is all kinds of epithelial types. Epithelia is a cellular cells that cover things. We think of it as covering the surface of things. So everything in your body that has a surface has epithelial tissue. And there are all kinds of epithelial tissue. Let's go back to the 4 types of tissue. I'm going to write these on the board so that I can, because I want to keep coming back to them. So we have connective, that's the one I was forgetting. We have connective tissue, we have muscle tissue, nervous, and epithelia. Read that pretty well. Okay, so we'll just have that as a reference as we're going to go through some of this. Now, let's see if we can find all of these. Okay, so we have this connective tissue. Connective tissue is just what it sounds. So we have different types, but the connective tissue is would be here. It would be that serosa. So that would be this membrane that's kind of connecting and holding all of these tissues together. And we also have we would have the muscle tissue and the smooth muscle. We would have nerves in the myocardial plexus, and we have epithelia everywhere. Want to make sure everywhere covering. And just to make it a little more confusing too, is that we consider the intestines really to be outside the body, even though they're inside the body, because if you think about it, we have a tube that begins in our mouth and ends in the anus that is really open to the outside world. So this is the tube within the tube that is us. And just keep that in mind that, you know, the outside world comes in to our mouths, goes through our intestines, and then out again. And when we look at embryology, maybe it'll make a little more sense. But epithelia is everywhere. And there are different types of epithelia. There is squamous, and we're going to go through them bit by bit. But there is squamous tissue, squamous epithelia. There is columnar epithelia. There's cuboidal epithelia. And this refers to the shape. Squamous epithelia is very flat cells. Cuboidal and columnar are columnar. And then there are different organizations. We can have them simple, and we can have them striated. We can have them pseudostriated or pseudo. Okay, so this is the basis of epithelia. Epithelia, or epithelium, always has these elements. It always has an apical surface. I wish I had a pointer or something. I can't see this, so I can't put the apical. Maybe my mouse. No, it won't mouse. So the very surface, the free surface, is called the apical surface. Now, in the intestines, this would be the lumen. Lumen, are you guys familiar with that word, lumen? So the lumen is the that's the opening. So if you think of the intestines as a tube, the center of the tube that is open is called the lumen. So our blood vessels have lumens, our intestines have lumens, any of this central empty space is called a lumen. So the apical surface is what is covering that surface. Now on our skin, this is the apical surface of the epithelia of the skin. It's the free surface. So on